In 1884, after losing his wife Alice Hathaway Lee, Theodore Roosevelt left New York and went to the Badlands in North Dakota. He ran cattle, hunted thieves, and learned the hard frontier life. Later, he demanded firmness from William McKinley, but accepted becoming vice president in March 1901. In September, after the president's assassination, he assumed the White House. In 1901, with Lakota leader American Horse passing through Billings, Montana, two young Cheyenne women stop under a pine tree. They wear cotton skirts and shawls. One adjusts the other's clothing. The second stares back at the observer. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep making videos like this. At the end of the 19th century, families in the West lived far from roads and markets. When someone showed up with a camera, they turned their yards into a showcase. A sofa outdoors, tools neatly lined up, harvest and animals nearby. It was a deliberate message. We exist, we work, we are growing, put our place on this map that doesn't seem to truly see us. Ashishishi, the Crow Scout known as Curly, guided Custer's 7th Cavalry. On June 25, 1876, from a ridge in the Montana Territory, he saw the Battle of Little Bighorn turn. When the line broke, he mounted up and carried the message, Custer had fallen. The news crossed the forts and became a landmark of the height of the Plains Wars. On June 2, 1899, near Wilcox, Wyoming, robbers stopped a Union Pacific train, uncoupled the locomotive and express car, blew open the safe with dynamite, and took about $30,000. They fled on horseback, changing mounts. The trail led to Butch Cassidy and the Wild Bunch gang, but the manhunt lasted weeks and no one was arrested. On April 8, 1905, in Canyon Diablo, Arizona Territory, after a shootout, officers took the body of outlaw John Shaw from his coffin. They propped the corpse against the saloon fence, stuck a whiskey bottle in his hand, and posed. The scene became the town's official keepsake and a direct warning. Here, those who choose crime end without glory, for everyone to see. Around 1908, a northern Cheyenne leader led the sun dance on the southeastern plains of Montana. The community formed a circle, bodies painted red and black, branches braided into their hair. The ritual united fasting, song, and endurance to the rhythm of the drum, marking symbolic death, rebirth, and covenants that reinforced the group's cohesion. Texas, 1908. At Matador Ranch, cowboy Harry Campbell grabs the scissors and trims Canadian George Patullo, a reporter curious about the cattle world. The scene unfolds in a line camp, a semi-buried shelter used for work. Between conversation and chores, the visitor learns the West from the inside, and the routine becomes a story that outlasts its time. At 13, Anna Emmeline McDoulet, known as Cattle Annie, plunged into crime in the Oklahoma Territory. With Jenny Stevens, Little Britches, she handled revolvers and carbines, stole and traded horses, bartered whiskey with Osage and Pawnee, and sold ammunition to gangs, gaining fame in the newspapers until she was arrested by U.S. Marshals in 1895. Around 1870, on the edge of the frontier, a Texas cowboy stops beside a man from the Great Plains, perhaps Kiowa or Comanche. The spurs, broad knife, tooled holster, and revolver speak of their trade. They face the moment with tense respect, showing what sustained life in a contested West. In 1847, after the death of his Salish, Flathead Nation wife, blamed on a Crow warrior, John Liver-Eating Johnson swore vengeance. For years, he followed hunting trails through the Rockies, plains, and rivers, ambushing Crow groups along their routes. The frontier counted the dead and the stories. The numbers vary. Legend says he removed livers to spread fear. Jordan, eastern Montana, around 1904. At Bob Levitt's saloon, cowhands lean by the door, escaping the dust from cattle drives. They whisper prices, adjust spurs. A horse stays tied to the post. In the small town, the bar becomes an office. Deals closed, news traded, and the next ride decided, where law arrived slowly in a dry stretch of the frontier. In October 1862, weeks after Antietam, Abraham Lincoln went to Sharpsburg to see the Union Army firsthand. He walked with Allen Pinkerton, head of intelligence, and General John A. McClernand. They crossed tents and wagons under a heavy sky, checked morale and supplies, and, amid maps and doubts, decided how to carry the war forward. On December 29, 1890, at Wounded Knee Creek, South Dakota, the 7th Cavalry Regiment surrounded a Lakota camp to collect weapons, fearing the ghost dance. A shot of uncertain origin triggered panic. Hotchkiss cannons swept the valley. In less than an hour, 150 to 300 Lakota, many women and children, were dead. In 1948, in the hills of Montana, veterans of Little Bighorn returned to the 1876 battlefield by the river. Lakota and Cheyenne reenacted the fight, where the 7th Cavalry broke, who tried to flee, where they advanced. Bill Grote recorded the meeting. It was the farewell of a generation and a reckoning with history. Grote would die in 2020. In 1907, Samson Beaver of the Stoney Nakoda Nation met explorer Mary Schaffer. With his wife Leah and daughter Frances Louise, he drew from memory a map of a lake in the mountains. Schaffer followed the clues to Chaba Imne, now Moline Lake, and recorded the place on official maps, showing how indigenous knowledge opened paths. In 1890, in Oregon, mines used water cannons to break down hillsides and wash out gravel rich in gold. Mounds of mud slid down and clogged streams. To open ditches and move pumps, they cut down forests and cleared land. Rivers shifted, bridges collapsed, farms downstream lost ground, and towns and commerce felt the impact for decades. In 1869, a Western Shoshone stops on a cliff and stares at the tracks that had just stitched the country together. Below, the Humboldt River winds around rocks and disappears into the canyon near Carlin. The Union at Promontory Summit, in the Utah Territory, brought speed and profit but pushed frontiers over tribal lands. The train passed and carried history's course with it. In 1910, in Mercer County, West Virginia, talk in church pews and market stalls still turned to two brothers who, half a century earlier, had marched on opposite sides of the Civil War, one in Confederate gray, the other in Union blue. The family went on with life, but the town kept wondering what choice can split a home in two. Skagway, 1898. Jefferson Randolph, Soapy Smith, runs Jeff Smith's parlor while the Klondike Gold Rush crowds the streets. He rigs raffles, runs shell games and a fake telegraph, keeps his gang on a tight leash, and buys off officials. The entire town becomes his business. Prospectors become prey. New Mexico Territory, 1908. A family pulls their wagon under the shade and opens the chuck box. Shelves reveal dented pans, tin plates, and wrapped flour. The lid becomes a counter. Dust clings to the wheels and harnesses. In the short pause, they cook, mend, trade hardware, and resume the trail toward lands promised on the horizon. Between 1890 and 1900, east of Salem in the Willamette Valley, pine forests gave way to the axe. Crews cleared land and left rows of stumps, marks of progress. Then came fences, dirt roads, and farms. The sound of saws gave way to harvests, and new routes connected farms, warehouses, and markets in a landscape newly drawn. Around 1905, near Dodge City, Kansas, life on a small farm takes a pause. The Price family lines up in front of their wooden house. To the left, Bill Cope holds a puppy on a bicycle frame. Wearing wide-brimmed hats, they all face the newness, to record that times had changed, and they were there to prove it. In 1910, in Sheridan, Wyoming, a man rides across the street on an elk. It wasn't a show. In the early 20th century, farms in the northern United States trained elk to pull sleds and serve as mounts. The scene sums up a West still in formation, where necessity, risk, and curiosity cleared the way long before the rulebook reached everyone. Idaho, 1890s. At Jackson's Bar, the owner kept a rifle in plain sight on the counter, a sign of who was in charge. With the sheriff appearing only occasionally and the law arriving late, the bar became a checkpoint. The rule was simple: come in, buy, speak respectfully. Miners, cowboys, and travelers knew any slip could cost dearly. When the war ended on paper, violence continued on the ground. In northern Texas in the 1860s, Confederate veterans formed armed bands, attacking roads and silencing freed people and Union sympathizers. The battlefront turned into guerrilla warfare, while the law, slow to move, tried to catch up. In Sherman, this turn gained force. In Fort Belknap, Montana, an Aaninan woman faces the century with a name forged in resistance, takes a prisoner Blackbird. On the northern plains, her people lived for decades under federal control, but held on to their language, cared for rituals and family, adapting tradition to stand firm, passing the struggle to today without giving up memory. In 1885, on a clear morning, two women in long skirts stop on the main street of Helena in the Montana Territory. They talk about prices and letters as the wooden shops open their doors. Vendors line up goods, wagons head for the mines, dust rises, hooves strike, the bell marks the start of the day, and the mailman quickens his pace. In 1885, at Fort Whipple near Prescott, Arizona Territory, a soldier of the 10th Cavalry marches alongside 3 Apache scouts. They track trails, check passes, and escort supply routes. Between signs in the dust and silences, field alliances guide decisions that push the frontier forward and may redefine the fate of the Southwest. In 1886, in the Loup River Valley, Nebraska, a couple and 3 children built a cabin of planks. The days passed between wheat and cattle by the water's edge. They faced drought, floods, and neighbors miles away. Distant railroad, slow mail. They lived by barter, grain for salt and kerosene, betting the next harvest would pay for winter and the next year's seeds. In 1892, Creede in southwestern Colorado boiled with the silver rush. The dirt street saw slow wagons. On each side, wooden shops opened early, and the post office sign guided newcomers. Telegraph poles marked the way. On the dry slope, one could see a city that had grown too fast on the edge of a mountain valley. In 1905, Orland Osgood set up a bar in what would later become Carter County, Montana. At the counter, cards and deals changed hands. In the rooms, short sleep. Cowboys, miners, and travelers coming from southeastern trails traded stories, credit, and cattle. Between comings and goings, the place became the knot that held the region together. Between 1905 and 1912, Irwin E. Smith traveled through Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona carrying glass plates. He documented the end of the open range, cattle handling, chuck wagon routine, night watches, and rides between ranches. On the edge of modernization, every gesture reveals choices that changed the course of the American West.